Hey guys, BigWillDogg82 In the Soil. This video, right off the bat, I just want to let you know is going to be different from what we would typically do. Instead of it just being, oh, this is what's going on here, and this is what I'm trying to take care of there, this is more of a, what does my garden mean to me personally and why I do it? So, to explain all that, it's going to be story time here. And we're going to be talking, about how my garden connects to not only my own personal reasons, whether it be for mental health or because of chronic pains and stuff, but also about its connection to my family, where we're from, and hopefully it'll just give you a better idea of who I am as a person. So, like I said, I hope you enjoy it, and let me know, if you like this, because this can be done from time to time. But let's get through this first one first and see where it goes from there. Now, first of all, thanks to my mother who went through all the photo albums, and she actually went out on the property that we're going to be talking about that connects to me personally. She grabbed, everything from old photographs to she walked us to the pond. She did a lot of stuff to try to get me what I needed to do this video here. So thank you, Mom. So the piece of property that we're going to talk about was bought in 1949, and at the time it was purchased, it was 126 acres of land in rural Virginia, and it was bought for the express purpose to farm it. And for much of my childhood, I can remember it being tobacco fields, and even today it's still farmed as a tobacco field. Even though it's not my family doing it, it's basically just leased land to allow it to be done. And so there's no real processing by the family itself anymore. At one time, there was a smokehouse that was on the property that my mother would help load up to cure the tobacco into the smokehouse. So, like I said, that and even that was up for most of my childhood. I can remember, it just becoming dilapidated, and then at some point or another, either it was taken down or it fell down. One of the two. But yeah, for much of my childhood, I can remember going out there and just looking out to the left or the right of where the main house is now, and there's nothing but tobacco all along that stretch of property. There was always an initial main house there that always had family and relatives living in it, and then there was two houses one at the opposite far end that was, in this whole story, I'm going to reference those two houses as the blue house, which is the house that we would stay in as a family when we go to visit, and then the other house will be my Uncle Leroy's, which they were basically on the same area, but they were just decent enough, and he had his own stuff going on there with corn and some other stuff, but we'll get into that. And then the newest part of that property would be the house that my grandparents had built sometime later on. That is mainly the house that my mom, my dad, my grandmother, and my uncle stay at now, and where family gathers whenever they're coming into town for whatever it is. So, like I said, the blue house, the vacation house, or the visit house, Uncle Leroy's house, which was my aunt and my uncle's, but for simplicity's sake, we'll just refer to it as Uncle Leroy's. And then the old White House, which is, like I said, nobody's living in it now. And then the current main house, which is where everybody's at now. So as a kid, we got to experience so much stuff out there. And I mean, I can remember going out there and we would fish out there on the pond that was sort of kind of tucked down away from the road and in a different direction from either of the houses that were mainly right along that road. And there were, things like deer and all kinds of stuff that would come out. If you were on the back patio, you could look out, especially like in the mornings, and then in the evenings, just as the sun was going down, you could sort of kind of see them coming out. So there was that. But we had family reunions out there. There was just a lot of things that are done on that property. And when you go out there, it's a different life altogether. It's so slow paced, so relaxed. Internet sucks out there. For the longest time, even as an adult, having my own cell phone coverage is spotty out there. So it's, like I said, it's out there. But with that came a lot of freedom. My grandfather, who was actually a reverend, he had a church in New Jersey, which is where I was born, and where we went to visit them from time to time when they were living there. Both my parents, while they were born and have family roots both in Virginia, they didn't meet until they were in New Jersey. And I was lucky that whenever we went to New Jersey, we could see both sets of grandparents. And so my dad's parents were Ruth and Willie, who, of course, my father was the namesake of my grandfather, of which I am also a namesake too, so I am the third. They were in a 2-story house, and my aunt lived with them, my great aunt, and we used to go there all the time, especially when we were young. Now, if you were to ask my sisters, my grandmother was pretty stern. And as a kid, I didn't get it. As an adult, I can understand a little bit more. But at the same time, we were kids. We were kind of ruly sometimes. But the thing about my grandmother that I still remember and I still appreciate is when we were there, she would make us breakfast or dinner. She'd always be there in the kitchen doing stuff. And she had a job. Especially when we were young. Well, I don't know if my sisters would remember this, but I remember Mom taking Grandma to work and drop her off from time to time when we would just happen to be into town or something. And I know that I inherited some things from her. Like, she was really big into German chocolate cake, and she would always have candy in the fridge or the freezer that was off limits. We never got it. Well, no, I'd say never, but seldom we got it. But we knew not to mess with her about it. But yeah, she loved German chocolate cake. She loved lasagna, and I those are my two favorite things in this world. If you want to fatten me up, give me a German chocolate cake and lasagna. Well, I make my own lasagna these days, but yeah, that was Grandma, and she used to love her soaps, and when she was babysitting us kids for Mom and Dad while they went and took care of other stuff, yeah, don't even act like you're gonna do something or watch something else on that TV during soap operas, because that meant serious business. She did not play, and I can respect that, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I enjoyed spending time with my grandparents, even my grandmother. And like I said, I understand things a little bit better now than I did as a kid. But, you know, she was there. She was there. And then my grandfather, to me, and I'm pretty sure to my sisters too, he's just a big softy. Anything we wanted, anything we, you know, wanted to talk about or hang out or whatever, he was fine. He was a big smoker, and so yeah, that meant, you know, whether we were sitting down drinking tea in the kitchen with him, or if I was in the bedroom with him and Grandma from time to time, but usually it was just him and me. We just sit there, watch TV, lay on the bed, talk. You know, he was real good about that, and I enjoyed the time where we would just sit on his porch, and we would just, like I said, he would just. To him, probably it was, you know, couldn't probably cared less because it wasn't a whole lot going on, but to us kids, at least for me especially, just hanging out with Grandpa on the porch. Sometimes taking car rides with him. But, you know, he was just a big softy, you know, and yeah, I get there was times where I know, you know, Grandpa and Pops would, you know, every family has their things going on, and even then, you wouldn't have known nothing or anything. Also, at Grandma and Grandpa, we'll call Z's house, we had my dad's dog. At this point in time, he was really old, and the dog's name was Smokey, which I always loved going there, but like I said, not too long that I can remember Smokey was around, and then Smokey had to be put down. But hey, that was also another fringe benefit of going over to Grandma and Grandpa's. Now, there was a scary thing about Grandma and Grandpa's house that I did not like, and that was going downstairs into the basement. Now, Grandpa, this must be where I inherited it, because my dad inherited it too, and was a tinkerer. There was always a car in his garage that he was working on, and so the garage was filled and had tools galore. And then downstairs in the basement, same thing, there's a bunch of tools down there, and it wasn't a massive garage, but it was just big enough and cramped, and that it was, to me, it was scary. And so it sucked going down there, but every now and then, whether it be to go get dog food for Smokey, or just being nosy and looking at all the tools and stuff Grandpa had down there, I would go down there and play. And then the also cool thing too is Dad's room was there, and I was, you know, spending the night in there sometimes. They had a pull-out couch in the living room that we would sleep in sometimes, or I would sleep on the couch that was out there. But it was kind of cool going to my dad's childhood home and crashing and sleeping in his old bedroom that had most of his old stuff still there, his TV, which I ended up taking eventually and bringing to Florida at the time. Eventually, both Grandma and Grandpa passed, and while it was sad, the good thing about being in Jersey, we had family everywhere. We had aunts and uncles down the street and around the corner. We had our grandpa and Grandma J, as I'll call them. So Grandma and Grandpa Z passed, both of them, and then we had Grandma and Grandpa J who were there. And Grandma J is the only one who's around now, where Grandpa J is the one who bought the farm. And the other thing about New Jersey, going back there to see grandparents, is without fail, every time we went in there, we knew that Grandpa J was going to take us to the Chinese buffet. There was just one specific Chinese buffet that he would love to go to, and every single time we went to town, that's exactly where we went. And Grandpa was the biggest softy. He, both my grandfathers were. The other thing he also did, whenever we came over, we can always open up their freezer and expect to see Jello pudding pops. That was his thing for us. His way of saying, I love you, I see you, have these. So we would raid those things every single time, and if they went out, Grandpa went to the store and got more. Now, saying that, my grandfather, kind of like me now, just did not stop moving. He just didn't. Most of the time, if I was to see a grandparent, it would be Grandma J. And we'll get to Grandma J because, like I said, she's a great grandmother, and I couldn't have asked for a better one. Not that Grandma Z wasn't a good grandma. She was just different. But Grandpa J, he worked. That was his job, to take care of the family, take care of, just things. He was just constantly go. So when we would come to visit, we might see him that first day. We'd see him multiple days throughout. But off and on is when we see him. Because he drove a trash truck for the city. He was a cemetery caretaker. So there was times where my mother or father would take us out to the cemetery or whatever, because that's how we would see him, because he's out there mowing the entire cemetery. He also was the reverend. So, like I said, they had a church in Jersey, and they also had a church in Virginia. And while in Jersey, that's what he would do. And believe it or not, a Southern Baptist reverend has a lot to do. And like I said, he gave us the time that he had, but he was just busy all the time. But he spoiled us more than anything. Like I said, we come in town, hey, what do you want? Get it. Here's some walking around money. Or hey, Clay, who is our uncle, who's only 7 years older than me, he's more like a big brother, he's my mother's brother. He'd be like, hey Clay, here's some money, why don't you go take him to go do something? So like I said, he might not have had all the time in the world, but he was a very attentive and loving grandfather. Now my grandmother, there was nothing I could do to be seen in a bad eye with her. Having said that, my sisters would be happy to point out that of my grandmother's 5 grandkids, me, and the single solitary grandchild that ever pushed grandma to the limit to where corrective action by herself had to be done. Again, another situation at the time, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Now, as a parent, I understand it. And Grandma, I deserved it. Yes, I did, Grandma. I deserved that. I deserved that correction, and I'm still sorry about that. But outside of that, that was the only mean spirit. And that wasn't even mean. That was a lesson learned. Listen to what your grandmother says. And do it, most importantly. But other than that, oh God, like I said, make breakfast. Are you hungry? Dinner? What do you need? And she was always there. Always there. Whether it was just mom and dad, stopping by with us to do whatever, hang out, and then we all left, or there was times where I was like, hey mom, dad, can I just stay here with Clay and grandma? And that's all it was. It's, me, Clay, and grandma, until grandpa got home from doing one of the many things he was doing, and that was awesome. It's still awesome that I can sit there and say that as a 43-year-old man with adult children, that they are far old enough to know now who Grandma is. Arr, get me my feels. That's not nice. Now, a thing that Grandma don't play with, though, is acting up in church. Grandma didn't play. My mother certainly didn't play. And dare you ask what time church is over? Because if you don't know anything about a Southern Baptist church, there might be a suggested time of ending things, but depending on how many people catch the spirit up in there that Sunday, you can get out on time, but most likely, you ain't. It's just a fact of life, and it's not a knock or nothing. It's just the reality of the situation. Very many Sundays, I was ready to get out long before service was done. But the bonus was, half the time I got to sit next to Grandma. And if Grandma had gum, she gave me gum. Or if I got sleepy, sometimes she let me sleep on her. But that was still hazardous, because if Grandma caught the spirit that day, she'd jump up without any kind of warning. So, yeah, you can imagine how bad that could have went. But, you know what? That's just Grandma. Grandma is 100% a devout Christian, and believer through and through, and you can't fault her for getting her feels when she's at church, especially when Grandpa was the man up at the pulpit, giving sermon and leading the service. So those are very, very fond memories I have. And it was awesome. It's awesome. And like I said, the same thing happened in the Virginia church, which was bigger. And it's actually kind of prideful that, hey, my family's got a church. And it's been that way for a while. And my mother, matter of fact, took over for my grandfather after he passed. So she is now a minister and, is handling things up there at the church. So that's another thing that, memory that just passed on to, from one parent to another. And I'm very, very thankful for all that. So now we're going to get into the military service real quick with my family, because I'm actually very, very proud of the number of individuals in my family that have given service to the country. And this isn't necessarily to sit there and, put a feather in a cap or do anything other than to acknowledge the fact that I know of the individuals, and even after I enlisted, and then further on after that, just for me personally, made the I guess the fact that they did serve matter that much more to me personally, because part of that reason was because I didn't serve out as long as I had originally intended to, and it wasn't like it was something like I screwed up or I did something I shouldn't have or said something I shouldn't have. It was a medical condition that just left no other options after numerous, medical procedures and stuff like that to try to correct it. So, beginning with my father, Grandpa Z, he was in the Army. My father was a Marine, a very proud Marine, and not that anybody else wasn't proud of their service or what branch they served, because I sure am, but my father is, yes, that's one thing. If you asked him to, sort of introduce himself or say who he is, he would probably bring up Marine as the second or third thing. My mother, she was in the Air Force. She was an officer. I know one of my cousins, EJ, he was a Marine. And I believe there was a few one or two others that I'm missing here. I'm sure plenty of my great uncles and stuff like that were either one branch or another, and I think there's another cousin, but I'm not positive on that. I should probably ask my mother, but I think I've bugged her enough because she's helped me quite a bit through this. But then, like I said, it's me, and well, fortunately for me, or unfortunately, at the time, I had enough classes filled up, but I still needed one more elective, and wouldn't you know, the only thing that there was spot for me was ROTC, and I was not happy. I was not happy. I let my guidance counselor know I wasn't happy. I let my parents know I wasn't happy. Probably the first day or two I had to show up in class, you could tell that I wasn't happy, but that quickly changed. And it wasn't necessarily because, it's a, military and they're going to change you and stuff like that. No, it was the people. And not only were there friends that I'm still cool with and I still talk to this day, but the competition and then the requirements of the course itself sort of kind of lured me in and made me want to be there. It made me want to, get a higher rank in our class. And I pretty much stayed there all 3.5 years. So for me, it was kind of cool looking back on that and knowing exactly how bad I was just like, ain't for me. And then I got into it, and then all of a sudden, it's like I didn't know what I didn't know, and now it's like I know for a fact I want to do this. So we even had a field trip to go to Quantico, Virginia, and we didn't know at the time, but our master guns, our gunnery sergeant, who was one of our teachers, we had Commander Adams, who obviously was Navy, and then we had Master Guns, who was a Marine. Well, he ended up passing shortly after his wife passed, and he wasn't able to make the trip with us to Quantico because of his wife's passing. Well, little did we know that the trip that we would normally take every year was not only going, well, we knew it was going to Quantico, but we didn't know it was basically a mini Marine Corps boot camp. Yeah. And a lot of people, including me, I thought this was going to be a fun trip, but we quickly realized that it wasn't necessarily going to be a fun trip. And not everybody that went on this trip were prepared mentally to be in boot camp. I mean, we were in dorms, we had bunk beds. The second day that because we got there late, the second day we were there, we were out running 1.5 miles in t-shirt and shorts, and I kid you not, it was like 28 to 30 degrees out. Needless to say, a lot of people just said no and threw up a fit, and it became kind of a wedge, because what had happened was, if you decided to opt out, or you said, nope, this isn't what I wanted, you were put into a separate group, while everybody else who was fine, me included, were on another. And so it was rigorous, and you had, they treated you like you were in basic. And for a lot of us, that was fun, just because that's what we wanted. We knew, and it was mostly seniors that were among the ones, but there was a few underclassmen too. But at the end of the day, or most of the way through the day, Commander Adams realized that it was sort of kind of separating our entire group of students and stuff. So he just put a stop to it. And I understand why he did that, because it was supposed to be a fun trip. Some of the students weren't enjoying the trip. They felt like they were being left out because we were doing a bunch of cool stuff. But again, that was just another thing that just solidified for me that it's fine. I'm fine, I'm cool, because in a weird way, being the only son of a Marine, and again, I was unruly, so I could cope. I could deal with it because, believe it or not, I can focus on what needs to be done when it's just, a bull in a china shop. So for me, that not only helped me in ROTC and on the field trip, but it also prepared me for when I went to basic. My youngest is a lot of ways like me. He is to the nth degree of the nope, not doing it, I can't handle it. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. The family has put enough, of our butts on the line to do something as noble as serving the country, which is basically having your behind being a blank check that the government can cash in at any time it wants to. So I understand. The bonus, though, is he is a EMT, a job that I could never do. Dealing with the stuff and trauma that he's going to have to deal with as a job, I couldn't do it. So, in one way, he's still serving the public. So, son, good job. So, on one of the visits to my grandparents' house, we kind of got a couple of lessons. One of them I thought was funny, and the other one, it just learns where your food comes from. I'll put it that way. So we came into town, and we sort of kind of overheard that my Uncle Leroy, who again lives next to the Blue House across the tobacco field, had a hog. And of course, city kids were like, let's go see that hog. So we walk across the entire field, and at this time it had tobacco growing in it. So, of course, Snake City. But without even thinking about that, we make it finally over to Uncle Leroy's, and he's got this hog, and it's in a barbed wire corral, basically. And there's corn growing there, so of course we're thinking, let's pick some corn, feed this hog. So we're start to do that, and after I gave a couple of ears of corn, I sort of kind of get sidetracked. I want to go over there and look at the Blue House. And of course, nobody's gone through it because nobody was planning on staying there. Well, I might have got within 5-10 feet of that house, and all of a sudden, I hear screaming. So I run back, and there's my sister holding her hand, blood dripping down her elbow. Now, at this point, I'm sure that she got gored by that pig. She forgot to get her hands out the way, and the thing bit her, or whatnot. Come to find out, no, she sliced her finger on the barbed wire. But yes, she's standing there, and like I said, there's just a stream of blood coming down. And you might be thinking, okay, well, that's my little sister, so I was neglectful of my duties. And I'd sit there and say, you're wrong. Why? Because my uncle, the big brother to me, was there. So technically, that's not my job. It's not on me anymore, since I respect my elders. So that means all the decisions lie with him, not me. Well, somehow, someway, it ended up getting word to my dad, because he ends up coming and he's sitting there telling my sister, well, here, let me take a picture. And so she holds up her hand or whatever. He's like, no. Do with your middle, the one that's cut, your middle finger. Hold it up. And she sort of kind of looks at him like, are you playing with me? We're not supposed to be doing that. Well, he's like, yeah, go ahead and do it. So here she is, flipping my dad the bird, showing her fingers. And I think it's hilarious. But what it didn't end up being like that big of an issue, because I don't remember her going to get stitches or anything like that. I think Mom fixed it. She's a nurse, by the way, if I hadn't mentioned that beforehand. but I'm pretty sure it was just fixed with a Band-Aid, no big deal. Well, we eventually leave. I can't remember how long we were there for, but we were there for a little bit, and we leave. So the next trip out, again, we're staying at the house, and usually we'd have some type of dinner with family come over or whatever. So that's exactly what happened. And we are sitting there thinking, hey, let's go feed that hog again. Not knowing whether or not there was any corn left or any of that stuff, because it was probably later on in the year, but it was obviously warm still, or else we wouldn't have wanted to go out. So the next day we're going, and again, walking across the tobacco field, and we get there. No hog in sight whatsoever. Bummer. Well, somehow, some way, we ended up going into Uncle Leroy's house and sitting down at the table talking to him or whatever with both my parents. And of course the conversation eventually goes to, where's the hog? We wanted to feed it. Blah, blah, blah. Uncle Leroy gets this real, kind of like a sly grin. And I'm sure at this point, both my mother and father know exactly what's getting ready to come out of his mouth. But we, as children, are completely oblivious. Well, he goes, well, you know, the dinner we had, it was pretty good, wasn't it? And of course we were like, yeah, pork. Who's not going to like pork? And he goes, well, that's the pig. Wait, you mean the pig we were feeding the last time we were out, that was it when we came back in and had dinner? Yeah. Yep. Exactly where the pig went. So, back to what I was saying about learning where your food comes from. Just because you feed it does not make it a pet. It's still food. And that we learned right there on the farm. So, thank you, Uncle Leroy, for the life lesson, I guess. The ways of the farm, I would call it, on that situation. A kind of funny story that ended up happening also on the farm. My grandparents' farm has a pond, and it used to be a smaller pond. My mother, who sent me photos and stuff of the pond and a video, which I'll probably insert somewhere around here, it looks way bigger because of, I guess, erosion, my grandmother says. But before, it was a much, much smaller pond. Well, we were out there fishing. It was myself, both my younger sisters, my mother, my dad, and I believe my uncle / older brother, Clay, were out there. And I kept on seeing something in the water popping its head up. And then it'd be there and it'd disappear. Well, out in rural Virginia, your main thing that you're watching out for are snakes. It could be a harmless water snake, or it could be a venomous snake. But that's the main things you're worried about. And my mother is deathly afraid of snakes. So, I saw it a few times or whatever, and finally it's slowly coming closer. So I say something to my dad. I'm like, hey, Dad, I think there's a snake over there in the water. He looks, and finally he sees it. So, yeah, here comes Pops to the rescue because, yeah. He pulls out his Glock, waits until it pops its head up again. Boom! Big splash. We don't see whatever it was anymore. Don't know if he hit it. Don't know if it scared it enough to move or whatever. All I know, it was gone. Pops, being a Marine, trying to protect us kids, but I think he was just trying to keep Mama from going cray-cray if that snake got too close, if it was indeed a snake, because now thinking back on it, it could have been a turtle. Yep. Them turtles need to learn how to make themselves look less snake-like, because if you got somebody like Mom, yeah, it's not going to go too well for you. Love you, Mom. Alright, so I've talked about my mom and her little brother, Clay, who, again, like I said, was more like a big brother to me my entire life. He probably didn't want to have nothing to do with me. I know he didn't want to have anything to do with me until I think I was 14 or 15, and then we got close. And then he didn't want to have anything to do with my sisters because, you know, for the same reason, too young. But there's still one more sibling that I have not brought up yet, and it's another one of these strong women that I always had in my life growing up, and it's my Aunt Dolores. And Aunt Dolores was a lawyer, teacher, book writer, and she's another one of those ones that was always around. Her, and then eventually it was my Uncle Cliff, and my cousin Ashley, and then Alex. Alex is literally like the little brother I never had. The little brother I always wanted. And I can even remember a time when the first time that he spent the night over our house as a little bitty baby, I believe my sisters and I that night camped out in my mom and dad's room. And he was sleeping in the playpen. And I slept next to the playpen because I was wanting to help Mom take care of Alex whenever he woke up at night. Whether it meant feeding him, changing him, whatever. That was my little brother. Sorry, Ashley. Well, Ashley's fine with sharing him, I think. But yeah, that was my little brother. And so I would feel remiss not to include him in this because he's doing his own thing, and I'm proud of him for, you know, everything he's doing out in Cali. Much love, Alex, my little brother. And, you know, even my cousin Ashley, she's in Seattle. A mom, a wife, doing her thing. So love to you too, Ashley. I don't get to spend enough time with either one of y'all, and I'm sorry about that, but I do. I love you guys to pieces. So my Aunt Dolores was always, you know, strong-willed. She's determined. Like I said, she has to be, and tough when obviously she needs to be, because, like I said, being a lawyer and then a professor of law, I could not imagine for the life of me the amount of crap and snide comments that she had gotten over time that she had to respond to in the appropriate way. But I learned a lot about, you know, self-respect and heritage, being, you know, loving your heritage and making people respect you because you deserve it. And there's just a lot of lessons that she's taught me over the years that maybe when I was a kid they didn't necessarily hit home fully, but when I became a parent, I became an adult, those lessons did. So thank you, Aunt Dolores, for all of that. So that's all the main immediate family that I'm talking about. But yeah, so it didn't matter whether we were in Virginia or New Jersey, there was always family around, always. And it's a big family, a lot of characters there, and all this seemed to culminate, like I said, in the area or the vicinity of Grandma and Grandpa Jay's farm, which now is not the 126 acres. It's either been divvied up or sold off. I know there's a lot of things that they do with the property as far as, you know, the, you know, leasing out the land there. I know there's the trees there that are on a rotation. So there's still a lot of stuff being done. It's just, like I said earlier, not necessarily done by my family. But it's still the family's property, and that means a lot to me personally. So here we are for the first part of 2 of the My Garden Story series. I wasn't really planning on it being 2 parts, but the first part I wanted to do justice to both my family's history and sort of kind of give you guys the structure of what's going to be in part 2, because for me they totally do go hand in hand, and I couldn't necessarily give the weight of what comes in the second part without this longer drawn out explanation in part 1. Now, if you've been on my channel before, I am not monetized, and I've been doing YouTube for about a year now, and this video was supposed to have been out a while ago, and the reason it wasn't was mainly because of computer problems, and it's just the fact that it's old. And if you've seen snippets of my other videos, there's a GoFundMe that I'm running right now, and that GoFundMe is how you guys can help me out, continue to bring content if you're enjoying what I've done so far. And that GoFundMe link will be in the description of both this part and the second part, and that's so I can build computers that can help me grow and edit into the future at a more faster pace than I do now, because I'm telling you, these issues that keep popping up just don't seem to want to stop. So if you are not able to donate to the GoFundMe, or if it's just not a good time for you, I completely understand. So there's no pressure and no ill will on any of that. I'm just glad that you're actually getting to this part of the video and seeing this. So the people who have already donated, I am wholeheartedly and completely blessed that you guys have done so far. Is it a lot? No, but it's the fact that you guys cared enough to want to help me grow, and that really does touch me. So that's it. The next part may or may not be as long. It probably won't be as long, because the next part I have most of my own video and footage or pictures and stuff like that, so it shouldn't be that long, but we'll see. Well, with that, I'm your boy, BigWillDogg82 in the soil, and I'm out of here, guys. See you later.